Welcome back to another edition of the B4evaKool podcast. My name is Rex45. This evening we have a Hayley Cox in the building. Welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. A little bit of technical difficulties, but it's always like that when you're trying out new stuff.
Yep.
So, how about yourself? How are things?
Pretty good. Had a busy day at work today, but we're winding down, so I'm good with that.
There you go. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I think God, it's been years now. I think one of the first times you came to Lowden with the company you work for is I remember seeing you in, I think it might have been 2019 or it might have been a while ago.
I think it was 21.
Okay, 21.
Because that was when I got my race license at Lowden.
Okay. That's what's up. So let's jump right into it then. And let's talk about how you got into riding, from different folks that we've had on. Some folks have been able to get on a bike at a very young age because their parents were into riding and stuff like that. And, for other people, later in life, like myself. So, what was your first, memory of riding and getting on a bike and all that?
I actually started pretty late. I think I was 26. So that would have been 7 years ago. No, sorry, 6 years ago. And I was really into cars.
Okay.
And that started when I was in I went to college. I got, my mom had actually bought a cool car, like a midlife crisis convertible. And
Okay.
we live in Massachusetts, that's where I grew up. And I was at school here in Florida. And so she gave it to me because a red convertible had no business in Massachusetts. So I had that car and I was modifying it. I met my now husband and we would go do car events. We did autocross, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's really
Yep.
baby racing, in parking lots in
Yeah.
your daily driver.
Oh,
So
so
we
let's
did
let's talk
that.
about what was the convertible?
It was
What?
a red 350Z convertible.
Oh, okay, that's what's up. Yeah.
And I really modified it. I don't know if you know what the word stance means, but where you lower it and
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was into cars, and I loaded
yeah.
every car I had, and exhaust,
Yeah.
and engine swaps, and stuff like that.
It
So,
was dog slow, so I just made it look cool. It had plasti dip on it. It color changed, the whole thing.
uh-huh.
And so that got us into autocross. And
Yep.
then we went through a couple of cars together doing autocross. And then he bought a go-kart, which in terms of autocross is a lot more than when you go with your buddies and you go do electric go-karts.
Yeah.
They're usually the first one we had was a 2-speed. It was a Rotax engine, what's in a Ski-Doo or a snowmobile.
Yep.
And then the second one was a 5-speed YZ motor. And that thing was terrifying. That was terrifying. But so we were racing that. And I was honestly a little jealous that it was his thing was the go-kart. I raced it too, but
Okay.
it was his thing.
You get one race, he gets three.
Yeah, and it was set up for him. And it's just like with bikes. If you were, my husband's, 6'2". So if him getting into a go-kart and me getting into a go-kart, it would be like me trying to get on a big dude's motorcycle and race it, right?
Yep.
It was not built for me. So I was like, you know what? I've always really I like cars. I like, go-karts. I'm going to do the motorcycle thing. So I went and did the MSF course. I went right out and did that. And I went out and bought a brand new motorcycle. I went out and bought a brand new CBR 500R. And I think that was in 2016.
Okay.
I went right out and bought that and started riding that on the street. And I did that for a little while. I was doing it and it was fun, but CBR 500 at the time felt sort of dog slow. I'd been in cars faster than that.
Right.
Then I was like, well, I really, really liked the R6. That was honestly what made me want to get into bikes was I just really liked how the 08 to 2016 R6 looked.
I know. No. It's a nice looking bike.
I know. It was especially back then, I was like, wow, this is that's what a motorcycle is supposed to look like. And so I bought that and I was riding it. I was riding a little more aggressively on the street. And I was like, this is just dumb. like this is stupid. Like
Okay.
this is not worth doing. I'm gonna go to the track because then I can like really ride this thing, right?
Right.
And
And just because of going doing autocross and doing the go-kart stuff, um did you kind of know that, hey, I can go to the track on a bike, or did you have friends that were already going to the track and stuff
I
like
did
that?
not know anybody here. Just a
Okay.
second, I'm gonna close my door.
All right, no worries, no worries. Um it's one of those things where I'm always fascinated to see how people find their way to the track, because I had no idea as well when I got my motorcycle and stuff like that, until somebody would kind of just told me I should go to the track after going for a Saturday ride or a Sunday ride with them. Hang
Sorry,
on.
I was muted.
Yep.
I didn't know anybody that rode at the track. I didn't really even know. I had a couple of people I would ride with sort of regularly that had these like Ducatis, and they were like exactly what you're thinking of when you think of a street riding a person who rides like a 12.99 on the street. And
Uh-huh.
like so we would go ride sometimes, but I wasn't really into the street riding, and I really wanted to like performance ride it. Like that was
Right,
sort
right.
of like the intent almost all along. And the idea that I could go to the track and pay whatever the fee was and just ride what in my mind felt like all day, right? Because with autocross you get to drive for like 50 seconds like
Hmm.
3 times.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you have to like work, and you have to like volunteer and like work the course, and you also
Okay.
have to pay. So like the idea that I could just pay and then go ride all day,
Okay.
what felt like all day, was
Right,
like,
and no
oh, that
work.
was very attractive. So yeah, I got going into that, and then it just really escalated rapidly out of control at that point. Once we got to the racetrack.
So now, when you say rapidly out of control, as far as prepping to get to the track, or once you got to the track, it was like, I'm all in.
I was like, I really did not want to ride on the street anymore, like at all. At
Gotcha.
that point, I actually never rode that first R6 at the track. I got into a ZX10,
Okay.
and
Oh,
that was
wow.
the very first bike I ever took to the track. I had a 2012 ZX10, non ABS.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so that was a lot
Oh,
of bike.
you have a need for speed, or you just like like the big motors?
I think when I had the R6, I was street riding still, and it was
Yeah.
really wildly uncomfortable. I just remember that it was wildly uncomfortable, and I was thinking in my head, well, I'll get 1,000. I don't have to go fast. And
Right.
being, I was older, I was in my late 20s, and I was a woman, and I'm like, I'm not going to go out there and like just noon it to the sky and like, you know, get in trouble.
Right.
So
Right.
I
Right.
was like,
Full
well, I can
send.
probably handle 1,000. I'm going to respect it. I can handle 1,000.
Okay. And so when you were riding the R6, were you in Massachusetts at that point, or
No,
Florida?
I lived in Iowa.
Okay. Okay. So
Yep.
what was it like riding like out there on
Pretty
the street?
awful, honestly. Iowa does not have a lot. There's not a lot of hills or curves. There's a lot of corn and straight lines.
Got you.
So, and honestly, I was drag racing before I ever started road racing. We've done like a little, and when I say drag racing, I mean like the most entry level imaginable. Like you show up at a test and tune and
Okay, gotcha,
run.
gotcha. You can
Um,
show up with your street bike and
yes.
just go have fun.
And my husband at the time was into bigger V8 cars. So like
Okay.
he had a Mustang, and then he had CTSV, and we would go drag racing because there's like hundreds of drag strips in Iowa. They're everywhere.
Okay.
Like I had like 3 within like an hour of me.
Quarter
Um,
mile, huh?
yeah, so I would just go do that, and that was part of why I got the 1,000. Was I was like, this is the only thing we do for fun, and that's going to be a lot more fun on 1,000 than on an
Okay.
R6.
Okay. And you were dragging on 1,000
I was dragging that ZX10. I was
non
not super
ABS.
non-ABS. I was not super fast on it, but it was fun. I was having like a lot of fun, and that I was sort of comfortable in a race setting, right? I'd
Gotcha.
done the
Yeah.
autocross for a while. I did that, and so I felt I wasn't. I mean, I was still intimidated when I went to the racetrack, but I felt like more comfortable making that jump to the track, the road
Right, right.
course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then so let's talk about how you got to Loudon, and what was that decision?
So I'd been track riding for a while. I was in Iowa, Then we moved to Kansas, and Kansas actually it's shut down now, but they had the Heartland Park, which is in Topeka.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a road course where they also had a big drag strip. So I would go do drag and do the road course, but I never ever raced. And I still had that ZX10. And then, so I was working for a different company back then. I worked at what is now part of Raytheon. And then I worked at Garmin for a while in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to Florida, and I started working for the family business, which is Mayhew Tools.
Okay.
That's had the connection there.
Yeah.
So I moved here to Florida. There's a facility in Florida for Mayhew Tools. And so I moved here. And before I made that move, my dad, who's the CEO of Mayhew, reached out to me, and he was telling me about Niemer.
Okay.
And he knew that and I wasn't racing. I was riding motorcycles at the track. And so he knew about that. And John Grush actually used to teach ski racing, and I ski raced in the
Oh, no
Northeast.
kidding.
So I'm not sure. I remember my coach, and it wasn't John Grush. I'm sure he was like involved. I don't remember him like as significantly when I was ski racing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he was more involved with maybe like my cousins who also ski raced. So he was telling me about that, and that they were looking for a title sponsor, and he was talking to me about that. And he's like, you should really go up there. Like, if we're going to do this, we're going to be the title sponsor, you should go ride at Lowden.
Wow.
And so, because when I lived in Mass, I didn't do anything. Wasn't even in cars back then. I'd never been to Lowden. I went to Lime Rock like one time to do like a school thing, but I'd never ever been to Lowden. The first time I went was for NASCAR, because we sponsored NASCAR as well. So it was the first time I'd ever been to Lowden was to go see NASCAR.
So, and when your dad found out you were riding bikes and stuff like that, he was okay with it from day one? And I mean, obviously he got to the point where he's saying, hey, why don't you go up to Lowden and race up there?
Neither one of my parents were super duper stoked about it. I was 26, obviously, when I started, so they couldn't stop me.
Right.
I did get my mom to ride on the back of my R6 once, which was insane. Okay. We made it to the gas station, and she like was in the verge of tears and wanted to come home. But like I said, I ski raced growing up. So I think I started ski racing when I was like 7. I mean, very young.
And now when you say ski race, is that like downhill? Is
downhill?
That like
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lived at the base of Berkshire East, which is a mountain in Mass. Okay. And so I ski raced, and it was like a huge part of me and my sister's life like revolved around ski racing. Every single day in the winter we were skiing. We skied like constantly.
Wow.
We were both decent. Like we did junior Olympics. Like my cousins were better. They went on to like pursue further with skiing, but we skied pretty seriously all the way up through high school. Wow. And so when we talked about like me riding the motorcycles, I'm like, well, it was obvious like I had like a problem with speed. Like that should have been clear from the beginning that I had a problem.
So, 7 years old, going fast.
And they were very supportive of that. And obviously it's very similar. There's a lot of similarities between ski racing and motorcycle racing. But I was like, you were okay with that? That was sort of a high risk activity. This isn't really that different. Like it's all about, being skillful and practicing and everything else. So.
Nice. And so between the family business, you came up to Lowden, and you've already gone to other tracks. So what was your experience coming to Lowden, going through the course, the Penguin School, and I don't know how long because I think in 21, I started going up and down East Coast for doing Azra CCS. Mm-hmm. So I did like between Neymar and Azra CCS, I did like 21 rounds that year. What was your experience like getting to Lowden and the track itself?
I had been really spoiled with a lot of really nice racetracks. My home track in Iowa was Black Hawk Farms, which is a pretty small track.
Yeah, I've been there.
And then I did Road America. That was my second track day, was Road America. So it was kind of like, it's hard to hold a candle to that at that point.
Yep.
Especially on that ZX10. That was wild for a second track day. And I'd actually, before I moved to Florida, I had done Hallett for the first time.
Okay.
So I'd done like Hastings, Black Hawk, Autobahn in Chicago, and
Mhm.
I'd done Hallett. And in general, Hallett has like a reputation in the central part of the country as being one of the most difficult, a similar reputation to Lowden, right? It's
Very,
very
very technical.
challenging, very technical, very bumpy. The surface is really challenging, and
Yeah.
there's for the Midwest a lot of elevation.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd actually just done that, and I'd gone with a group of folks who were like, hell bent that this was like the worst track that they'd ever been to. Like it was dangerous, like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
safe. And
Yeah.
then I got to Loudon, and I'm like, this is the hardest, bumpiest, most technical track I've ever been on. I'd never done a super speedway track either. I
Okay.
had not done Homestead yet
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Daytona.
Okay.
So that I just remember I had my R6 at that point. I had a 2017 R6, and it was stock. It was totally stock. And I just remember going up that hill the first time. I think that's three, four.
Turn 3 to 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as you're coming like up the hill, and I like my whole like I could feel my teeth in my jaw as I come like up over the speedway, and then
Yeah.
coming back down in that same spot. What is that like 8?
8, 9, 10 over
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! I just remember I did the penguin school, and I just remember they're like, you just have to stand up. No one had ever told me to stand. I was like, are we going off road? Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah, stand
Yeah.
up. I was like, oh my god.
And did that help a little?
It did. I got used to it pretty quickly. It was a lot though. I think I was at that point I had not wrecked yet.
Okay.
I was very brave. I was very brave at that time, so I was pretty willing to try anything.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And the 3, I think it was maybe even 4 days. I think I did like a track day, then the school, then the racing. I think it
Okay.
was
So Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
yes.
Sunday. Yeah. Yep.
So that was a lot of riding. I did a lot of riding. And I think that was really for me, I tend to learn tracks a little slower, but
Yep.
once I learn them, I'm very, very consistent. So it was good that I was there for so many days and did so much riding. And that the R6 I was on was stock and it was pretty capable. So I wasn't having any like mechanical issues, and I was pretty
Right.
comfortable on the bike. I've been riding that bike quite a bit at that point. So
No, I was gonna say, were you what were your nerves like? Because I remember Loudon was the first track I went to. So, in the basic class, the first session out, I was questioning why I was out there. so, like, I mean, you like speed when you were young. So, did you just like for you, like going fast? You never bothered you.
it didn't bother. I was like, this is the sickest thing ever. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I should have done this sooner. Like, that was my first thought. Like, why was I not doing this sooner?
Wow. Wow.
I think when I went out and raced, I still get really nervous before I race. Ski racing was the same way. I'd get unbelievable. I can barely eat on race days. I get so nervous. But then,
Right.
like, when I get out there and I'm racing, like, the cliche like of being locked in, like I just like everything else stops, and I'm like, this is like my place. Like this is my happy place now. Once I'm out
Nice.
there.
Nice. And do you feel like by the time you got to Loudon, like you felt comfortable like with body position? Did you understand, like corner entry and exits and stuff like that?
At the time, I felt pretty confident with everything. I had just gone on the R6, which was a big change from the ZX10. And like looking back at it, I've obviously improved quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years. But I was feeling confident enough. Like I said, I had not wrecked ever at that point, so
Mhm.
I had a lot of confidence. And I think it was the most overwhelming part was learning how to ride that track because that's a really challenging racetrack. And then 2, the logistics of racing because
Mhm.
you don't really think about it like when you're doing it, but the logistics of like getting there. I had like a Audi SUV with a little 6x12 trailer. I drove from Daytona Beach, Florida to Loudon,
Yeah.
and I had all my stuff in there. So like all of my gear, my extra wheels, everything. And it was like even something as simple as like I'm in a new place. I don't have my normal tire vendor. I'm in a new place. I need a lever guard. I didn't have a lever guard. Like just the logistics. I just remember Tom Hines he did the tech, and I had never raced, and the bike was not safety wired properly. So, it was like, I think it was like 9 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock
Yeah.
at night. He's like helping me drill my swing arm. And I just remember he was like crouched down next to it with a drill. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to drill a hole in your swing arm. Are you okay with that? And I'm like, I got a race, man. Like,
Right,
let's
right,
do
right.
this. Like, get it done.
That's the one thing. I was so happy when they make a lot of bolts with pre-drill holes in them.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to drill. I've broken a lot of drill bits. You buy like 15 to 20 because you're probably going to break all of
Oh,
them,
yeah.
and go back to the store and
I have
get
a
more.
graveyard of 1/16 bits. It's horrible.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and so with all that said, you just took it with stride and got up the next day and took the class.
Yep, I took the class. Again, I thought the class was like a really good balance. I've done a lot of classes, right? Like whether it be like sort of like more personalized training, like Motovid had some training with Jason Pridmore that I did, which at the
Hmm.
time in retrospect, I knew nowhere near enough to get anything out of that class. I've done several of the trainings with Eric Wood. And then I thought that Penguin School was really good balance of like, they weren't like teaching you how to ride. It was perfect for me because I didn't
Right,
really need
right.
to be. I obviously had a ton to learn, but at that point, I was just trying to learn how to race, and they covered that super well, right? Like this is what
Yep.
all the flags mean. This is what you should, if this situation arises, this is how you should handle it. And I thought it was. I've been to other places where the race school is literally like, "Do you know what the flags are? Yes, go race."
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a really good job of teaching, and having the basic course, the advanced course,
Hmm.
and the track experience course. So if you're not crazy racing but you're better than beginner, you can get information and get coaches to help you work on your skills. And I find that riding at Lowden and learning to ride at Lowden and to race at Lowden, I should say, it makes you quick when you go to a lot of other tracks. Or for
Yes.
me, I definitely, maybe because it's less technical, and there's not a wall at turn three. There's,
Yeah.
there's certain things,
Yeah.
you don't feel
If
like you're
you
gonna hit. Go ahead.
if you're like comfortable flying into turn one at Loudon, turn one at Homestead's a cakewalk,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
like it's
Yeah.
the same thing but flatter. And if you can go up the hill at Loudon, like I have never experienced a turn like with a scarier like wall, like backwards hairpin uphill thing going on. So like
Yeah.
any other turn is just a cakewalk in comparison.
Yeah, and the fast guys, they go deep into turn three too,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
even like
I think the
they
only place I've ever been that had anything even remotely like that was PBIR Palm Beach, and they shut
okay.
that down, right? And they had that back straight. I don't remember what the corner number was, but that back straight, and you
Yeah, yeah.
basically were just accelerating full tilt like into a wall, like as
Okay.
hard as you could.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that's probably the only place I've ever been that it's a similar feeling. Like you're like
Okay.
accelerating towards a wall. Even at Loudon, it's not so bad because you're kind of like accelerating like and turning. And then
Exactly.
once you kind of get where you're going, then you stand the bike up and you get on the brakes. But man, that feeling is if you can accomplish that and like be comfortable, like being that hard on the brakes, like facing a wall, like that's pretty good.
Exactly. It's very hard to get the brain to override
Hmm.
and break later. I'm still working on it.
It's a tough one. That's a tough
Yeah.
one.
So now, and so after your first race weekend, it was just like it's a no brainer. You're just gonna keep
Yeah.
racing after that point.
I think I got my race license at in Loudon, and then I came down. And I think I did Homestead
Okay.
for CCS,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and that basically ended the season. It was like your guys' last round in
yeah.
Beamer,
Yep.
and then I came down and did Homestead, and I had never been to Homestead before, so that was my first time at Homestead, and I had just come off Loudon, and that I really felt that like if you can ride because Loudon and Homestead have like a lot of similarities because they're
They
both super
do.
speedway tracks.
Yeah.
So I felt like really comfortable at Homestead. So that was great. I like, and that CCS, that was like the year before they changed hands, I think.
If it's 21 or 22 or 21.
I can't, I think it was 21.
Yeah, yeah. No, they still. I think in 22 they changed hands. So
Yeah.
23, I believe, was the first year in the new hands.
So I did that race. And then we have another league that's not affiliated with CCS here in Florida called, it used to be called FEMRA, Florida
Hmm.
Motorcycle Road Racing, but now it's called Pan Am Superbike.
Yep, yep.
So I signed up for that the next year. But in March before the season, I think maybe I'd missed one round or something. I had some kind of conflict. In March, I had a really bad wreck at Jennings,
Okay.
and that I didn't ride. I rode maybe in like October of that
Oh
year.
wow, wow.
Yeah, it took me out like the whole season basically.
Okay, yeah. And what was that? And that was your first wreck too?
That was my first wreck, and I wrecked at Jennings. We had the bike had just gotten full suspension, right? So it was totally stock, and it got full suspension. And I was really having a hard time adapting to it. And Jennings is my hardest track.
Right,
It's
right,
just not for me. It's the most challenging track I ride. I know it's not like a super challenging track in general, but for me, like it just doesn't jive with my riding style like at all.
right, right.
I like to
I
ride big bikes in a fast line straight. So
No, I hear you with Jennings. I went to Jennings for the first time last year, and I went on my KTM RC 390,
Mhm.
and I struggled with some of the corners. Like I couldn't go from one corner to the next corner. Like
Mhm.
it just I
There's a
was either running
flow.
wide, yeah,
Yeah, and
you know,
if you mess it, it's like my thing is like I go into survival mode. You come into 3, so like there's that it's a back straight that's kind of a turn, and then
yeah,
you come into 3. If you're not on your A game from 3 until you come back out to the front straight, like you get behind, like it's just game over.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
it all flows together, and it's like I don't at Homestead and Loudon too. Like there's a lot of time to think. Like okay, I'm on the brakes or I'm on the gas, and I'm thinking about I'm going to go into turn 1. Like this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to be. At Jennings, you can think a little bit in like 1 and 3, but after you're not, there's a lot going on back there. Like you're just constantly switching sides, trying to position yourself. And if there's some, God forbid there's somebody in front of you you're trying to pass, like
yeah.
there's just so much going on.
And it's
But
a small, yeah, it is a narrow track, not as
yeah,
narrow as Black Hawk, but definitely narrow.
yeah. So we had just done the suspension. We were tweaking it. I was having a hard time getting used to it. And then in the afternoon, I started to feel a little bit better, and I just came into turn 1. It was it was completely stupid. I could have made the corner. I was like, well, I'll just go in the grass
Oh,
because in Topeka, which is where I've been riding for the most part before that, there's beautiful lush grass you can just ride in. Well, at Jennings, it's mostly sand.
oh,
So the second the bike came off the track, I tucked the front, and the bike like spun around and ended up hitting me in the back, and I broke 3 vertebrae.
oh, wow.
So we didn't know at the time. Bam Bam was actually there. That was like when like Bam Bam and I like became friends because he took me to the hospital.
Oh,
And
listen, I've
he
made
like
friends like
loaded
that.
he loaded up all my stuff in my trailer for me, and like he took me to the hospital in his truck, and like
Hmm.
he could tell something was wrong with me, and like everyone kept thinking I had like a concussion or something. I'm like, no, I don't have it. Like I'm fine. Like I don't have a concussion.
Yeah.
But he's like, you should really go get checked out, and like yeah. So he took me there, and like my husband and my dad had to drive up because it's a Jennings, and I live about 3 hours away from there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they had to drive up, and like he had like Bam had like taken care of all my stuff and
Oh,
like
nice,
packed it all
nice.
up. And I told my husband, I was like, just come to the hospital. He's like, well, what about your stuff? And I'm like, it's already my car's out there parked with all my stuff in it. You just gotta get here and we'll drive home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we never wish anything bad on anyone, but I've taken a rider to the hospital as well, missed some
Yeah,
races and stuff like that. And because I've had other people do it for some of my friends at Loudon and stuff like that. It's the kind of thing that motorcyclists or racers we just do. If somebody's hurt and they're by themselves, and it's always better to be safe, right? And
yeah,
and so it's the community is so great, awesome, because strangers will come and help you, and
yeah. It's
and
crazy. Like I was sort of new to the racing, and I was really new to Florida. That was like one of my third or fourth track day here in Florida. So yeah, to have somebody like I had met him at when I went to the track to do my race class with Niemer, but
mhm.
he didn't really like know me. Like we weren't good friends, and like to have him and Dave like just go out of their way to like help me, somebody they like barely knew, like it was like that kind of like solidified that like track family is like best family.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And so, what was your recovery like? For me, I crashed on the street in 2018 in the summer, and yeah, I lacerated my spleen, and
Mm,
I have a headless screw in my hand from
oof.
a fracture, and it took me. Well, it happened in August, so I didn't race until April the following year, so April 2019, and my hand was still jacked up. You know what I mean, and stuff like that. What was your recovery like? Was it just a lot of rest, or what was that like?
It was so my injury, while it sounds really severe, was actually not that intense. I really did not have a ton of soft tissue damage, which is kind of crazy. I didn't have like any bruised ribs or any internal damage or anything like that. It was really just like the force of the bike like striking my back, like kind of like crunched it.
Right, right.
So I went to the hospital and I like just don't bend over. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm like, I think I asked, am I going to walk? Am I going to be able to walk? And the
Right,
guy
right.
just looked at me and said, you walked in here, didn't you? And I was like, oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
So yeah,
Um,
it was like 2 months of like, don't lift anything, don't like bend at the waist because my injury is really high, like it's
okay.
between my shoulder blades.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
So they're like, don't like hunch over. Like, I had to sleep in a recliner. It was a lot like a collarbone injury.
Okay.
So I was like sleeping in a recliner. I couldn't really lift anything, but in general, it wasn't terrible. It was a lot harder to recover, like mentally from that. Because I'd had some minor injuries from ski racing, but nothing like that, right? Like nothing that intense. So I actually ended up. It worked out because so I went to physical therapy. No one said I had to go to physical therapy, but I was like, I'm scared to go upstairs. Like
Okay.
I'm gonna go to physical therapy. Like it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like shook my like balance and strength really bad.
Right,
So I did
right.
physical therapy for a while and I was going like 3 times a week and it was just really good. And I only did that for maybe like 2 months. And finally the guy was like, you don't need to be here anymore.
Please
You
don't come
know,
back.
yeah, he's like, you're fine. Like at this point, we're just doing weight training. Like we're
Okay.
just doing weight training. And so I pivoted and I started doing real weight training. So that got me into powerlifting.
Okay. Wow.
So like it ended up working out because now I
Is
can lift like quadruple what I could before the injury. So and
you
it
know?
keeps me like active because I find if
Yeah.
I don't stretch or work out or exercise, like it actually hurts more. So I'm really
Yeah.
about like keeping it really active and moving. So it worked out.
That's interesting. I did a little bit of physical therapy on my hand. But like, having, my belly cut open,
Mm,
and having staples and stuff like that, I really couldn't move. And like I was in the hospital for 9 days. And then after that, I really couldn't sit up, really couldn't do things. So once the staples is out and I could exercise, like I do sit ups all like every day still. And that's like, so many years ago.
yeah,
And it's just one of those things now. It's just like I gotta do them. It's something mental that's just kind of like if I stop, I might not feel right or whatever the
yeah,
case may be. And so I feel you as far as like all of a sudden just jumping into a workout to make sure you're fit and even better. For
yeah.
lack of a better word.
And honestly, like as bad as it sounds, at least now if I go work out, I go and I pick up 300 pounds. If I'm sore the next day, it's because I picked up 300 pounds, not because
Right.
my back hurts. It's because
Right.
I picked
Right.
up 300 pounds yesterday. So even that, like just mentally, like it's better, right? I'd rather be getting stronger and feeling stronger than just like lounging around doing nothing and also feeling bad. At least now I feel bad and I got stronger. So
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Now you mentioned that it was more mental to get back on the bike. So did you feel like you took more time off than you wanted to? And then what was the thing that to say, hey, you know what? Let me jump on the bike and get back out here.
so the bike was actually almost not damaged at all. The only thing it did is it folded. There was like a tab on the back of the tight tails subframe. It folded that and it needed all new body work that Reese had to redo. But besides that, it really did not need any work at all. So the bike was ready to ride almost immediately, which was not the case in my second wreck. The bike held it up a long time on the second wreck. But I didn't know. I was like, it almost felt like I didn't know how to restart. I was like, I crashed. When I crashed, I was like frustrated, right? Because I
Hmm.
was riding and I wasn't riding the way I wanted to ride. And we just changed the bike quite a bit. And I was like, well, if I get on it again, like, is it going to happen again? And what I ended up doing is I had some friends who came down from Kansas and we rode Atlanta Motorsports Park. And that was a track I'd never been to. It was some buddies who didn't race. So I went and I just like This will be like a no expectations, like
Right.
just go have fun with my friends, and I get to ride. And I'll just ride. I think I rode like intermediate group, and I was just like, I'm just gonna go out and I'm gonna ride. And I had like a new helmet, like a new suit, and I was like all amped for that. So that I don't know how I would have gotten in any other way because I couldn't like just go back to Jennings, right? Like I
Right.
couldn't
Right.
just go
Right.
back to Jennings. I couldn't just go back to Homestead. Like I felt like I had to like completely remove myself from like what I was doing and do something totally else. And
Hmm.
then but even still, like when I the night I drove up there, I was like a wreck. Like I was like, what if it happens again? What if I do it again? Like, is this even worth doing? Like, what if I get hurt again? And like that sort of dogged me for like probably 8 or 9 months. Like that question, like, is this even worth doing? Like if it happens again. And then I got my new suit with the airbag in it, and that was a game changer because I've had a much worse wreck since then, and I had the airbag on, and I
Yeah.
could if ended up breaking my hand, but if I hadn't have, I would have got right back on the other bike. I wrecked on the BMW. I would have got right back on the R6. So
Right. Right.
that's been a huge thing for me. I can't ride without it. I
Yeah, I
tried to
agree.
ride like 2 weekends ago at Jennings in the old suit without the
Yep.
airbag, and I was like, no, get
Yeah.
me back
Yeah.
in the airbag. I don't like this.
Yeah, my I one of my suits had gone off in a crash at Lowden, and I've had probably like a few street crashes and other crashes and another crash in my well, a couple of crashes in my non airbag suit,
Hmm.
and I like yeah I would love if I'm gonna crash I need to have an air vest
Yeah.
on or an airbag a suit with an airbag in it or something like that because it makes a world of difference. I mean, waking up the next day like nothing was hurting.
Yeah.
It's
I
yeah.
didn't have any because even when I had my bad wreck and I didn't have the airbag, I mostly bruising. Nothing like what you had, right? Where I had like internal stuff going on,
Mhm.
just some bruising, like my sides hurt. But when I wrecked, so that wreck at Jennings, I mean, I was maybe going like 40,
Right,
30
right.
when I was barely moving. It was the bike hitting me that was the no no. At Roebling, I don't know if you're familiar with that track, but it's
Yep,
got
been
a
there.
really long that front straight.
Yeah.
And I was on my BMW, and I mean, that thing can easily get up into the 170s, right? And I was in sixth gear, and I tried to go down into fifth, and it went into neutral.
Oh, wow.
And I was just totally not, I was trying to pass a guy on the inside in a race going into turn one. And I'd already started to get into position to go like for the pass.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah.
already not where I wanted to be on the racetrack. I was on the brakes trying to go from sixth to fifth, goes into neutral. I admittedly just sort of freaked out. I was like, oh gosh, this is not good. And then I kept trying to get the gear, and it
Okay.
finally started like clicking, and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to find third, and
Yes.
the bike's going to launch me to the moon. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
freaked out even more. I was just like
Yeah.
grabbing all the brake, just trying to get it slowed down and turned. And so, I mean, I think I left the racetrack going 70, 80.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I did not get slowed down very much. And I just came off and just hand first and my airbag deployed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd broken my back like a year and a half before that. Like it hadn't been very long. And I just remember my buddy was in the race with me, and he's like, I came back around, and you were just standing over your bike, like crouched, like in the low ready position. And I just remember standing up, and I'm like, am I hurt? Did I hurt
Yeah.
myself? Like, and I was just like hovering over it. And he's like, I knew you were okay because you look like the Michelin Man, like
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
all
yeah.
puffed up.
Right.
But yeah, that airbag was like a game changer. I didn't even think anything was wrong until like I went to help the guy like push the bike onto the trailer. And then, like
Okay.
my left hand was just not like doing what it was supposed to do. Like I couldn't
Got you,
like
got you.
grab
Wow.
anything. But that was
Yeah.
it. It was a tiny little break in my left hand. That was the only injury I had.
Yeah, and that's just I mean, in after my crashes, like I was trying to reflect on what could I've done different? Could I've done something different with my body in
Yeah.
real time to avoid hurting myself kind of thing. So how was that for you the second time? And did anyone say hang it up, or they just knew you're gonna get right back on?
I think my parents were like the first one, I think they kind of wrote off as a fluke. The second one, they were a little more concerned, I think. Like the second one, they were like, I told them how I don't hold any punches. Like I told them what happened and how it all went down. and the bike was like obliterated. Like the
Oh,
bike
wow.
looked really bad. Like a fork was bent. The whole left half of it was like ripped off. Like it was in a bad way worse than how my R6 looked after that crash. And I think they saw that, and then I was like trying to show, like, I'm not hurt. Like I
Yeah,
didn't really
yeah,
get
yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
So I think that one scared them more. They didn't like that one. I had to talk my way through that one a lot more. I had to talk my way through the first one.
Talk to you, or talk to them about it when you
Talk to
say talk
them.
your way
Like,
through it.
the first time they're like, "Oh my gosh, Hayley, like this is really dangerous. Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this to yourself?" And it's like, "Well, I really like doing it. It was a freak accident. I learned, right? At least if nothing else, I learned something."
Right.
And the second one, I learned something else. I learned, it's
Oh
because
yeah.
that bike has actually done that to me several. We haven't fixed it. It still does that. It's really like intermittent, and I've just come to realize it's just a personality perk
Right.
of that bike. But we haven't fixed it, so it's happened several times since
Got you.
then.
Now, are you running GP shift on that bike?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And now let's back up a little bit, because what made you decide to go with the BMW? And going from the R6, I don't know how much you tuned your bike, but you're probably somewhere between 110 horsepower to 120 30 horsepower,
Yeah, I
give or
think it's
take.
like 116 or something like that.
So,
That bike's actually gone now. I sold that R6.
yeah, yeah.
But the story about the BMW is an interesting one. Me and my husband got married in 2019, and for our honeymoon, we went to Australia. We
Okay.
both really wanted to go to Australia. He had a bunch of points from traveling for work, so we were going to go to Australia. And I found out that there was a track day, like an arrive and ride at Sydney Motorsports Park
Oh,
while we were
okay.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "Oh hell yeah, I'm gonna ride in another hemisphere. Like, let's go. We're doing that." And they had BMWs. They had like 2016 a fleet of them, kind of
Yeah.
like California Superbike School, like the same sort of setup.
Yep.
And so I went and did that, and I rode that bike, and it was like it felt like the bike was made for me. I was like, this is like amazing. I remember telling my husband when I came back, it was like the bike was riding and I was just present. Like
Okay.
the
Okay.
bike kind of rode itself.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was
yeah.
just so effortless, especially compared to at that point, I'd only ridden the ZX10 on the track. And that thing, if you've ever ridden both of them, the ZX10 is like super long wheelbase, heavy, like it feels heavy. And then the 12 especially is a little down on power, and there's
Mm-hmm.
almost no rider aids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of bike, and you kind of have to fling it around. It's just really heavy. Mine wasn't set up very well for me either. And I got on that totally stock BMW and just felt like a superhero. And I went home and just bought like a 2016 BMW,
Oh, wow.
within 8 months. I think I
Okay.
had a BMW. I didn't track that one. I rode it at Daytona once because all
Okay.
my other bikes were broken. But I did not track that one.
Okay.
And then I sold that one because that was my street bike. So when I stopped street riding, I sold that bike. And I had the R6. And I think the R6 is built for people who are like 120 pounds and like 5'11" or 6 foot. Like it's just not built for somebody who's a little shorter, a little wider. Like it's just, you have to be really long limbed and kind of flexible. Like it's just, there's a lot of stretching and reaching, and the bike was not well suited to me personally. And it's a really physical bike to ride. You have to be pretty strong. Like there's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
lot of moving. And so I was like, I kind of want to get back into a leader bike. And my buddy actually here in Daytona, who runs a race shop here, he has an S1000. And I was like, well, it's the best leader bike. In my opinion, it's the best leader bike. So if you're going to buy a leader bike, might as well buy the best, right?
Okay. Okay.
So I went out and bought it's the second brand new bike I've ever bought. The first one
Uh-huh.
being that CBR 500 way back.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
bought a 2023 S1000RR, and that was the
Okay.
one that I wrecked at Roebling. It's the one in the picture back here. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
day before I wrecked it.
Oh man, I mean, some people may argue about the best leader bike. I am a Ducati guy, even though I race a Yamaha RC and a KTM RC390. But it's very interesting. I do see a lot of people jumping on the BMW and saying it's really easier to ride than the R6. Yeah,
It is really, really easy to ride. I feel like, especially in today's age, where a lot of the bikes make so much power. I mean, that ZX10 I had maybe made like 160, 170,
Hmm.
maybe. And this BMW easily makes 200, right?
Right, right.
So you got a lot more power. At Homestead, this last 2 weekends ago, I can very easily get the front to come up every exit, and I can get the rear to spin and squirm and squeal every exit. Like, it's just, and then the bike just sort of effortlessly, I mean, you feel like a superhero riding it. Like, it just sort of effortlessly like does this for you. And you just, as long as you don't do anything really stupid, like the bike's going to kind of take care of you.
The bike is like, just hang on and enjoy the
Yeah,
ride.
just hang on. Like, hang on, we'll sort it out. And mine doesn't even have, I have sort of like a weird trim. I have
Okay.
a M Sport, so that means it had like the fancy rear sets, and it mainly had the different forks. And then I
Yeah.
don't have anything else. So I don't have like the electronic suspension, I don't have the rider modes, none of that. I just have like the livery. Like,
Now,
that was it.
when you say don't have, you just have it turned off, or
No. So BMW, I don't know if it's been this way for a while, and I hadn't bought a brand new BMW, so I don't know. The BMW I had before was like fully loaded. So the DDC has sort of always been an option, and that's just the electronically controlled suspension.
Mhm.
But you can also get, they have it called Rider Mode Pro, or something like that. But basically, what you can do is you can go in and you can dial like up and down every
Right.
part of the traction control. My traction control is like race, rain, sport. That's it.
Okay.
I
That's it.
can't control like anything else. I can turn the ABS off, which I would have swore up and down 3 weeks ago made no difference. But after we were at Homestead and I turned it off, it made a big difference. So I now ride without it.
So it was coming on, but you probably didn't even notice it, right? Is
Well,
that
so I guess what was happening, in retrospect, I'm an engineer, so I should have figured this out, but I didn't. They're linked brakes. So the front and the
ah,
rear are linked together. Now,
yeah.
that doesn't sound like inherently like a bad thing, like, whatever, right? But the problem is, if you have that rear load as you're coming into the entrance, it basically doesn't allow the bike to get all the way on the nose, and you
Right.
can't get that like carve feeling as you enter the corner. The bike is just entering the corner super flat.
Ah,
So I had not ridden the bike super hard since I wrecked it at Roebling. I've been riding it at Jennings, and we did a couple of other tracks, but nothing with braking zones like Homestead. And so we turned it off because I was really complaining. I was like, I can't get the bike to turn it. And I was riding my new R7, and that bike turns in like one finger, like a feather on the wheel, and like you're just turned in. So it was a big difference. And I'm like, something's wrong, like something's not right. So we turned it off, and it was like a game changer. Like, it was like instantly a tremendous difference. So live and
no,
learn,
that
I guess.
we're gonna talk about that R7. I thought I was bad. I have 6 bikes, and
I
I'm trying to
got
get a
there's
couple more.
my list is I have much too long a list of bikes that I have owned. So,
Okay, yeah, yeah. And so how many bikes do you currently have? You have the R7 and like,
and the Beamer.
and the Beamer. So what's the reason behind the R7? Obviously you got rid of the R6 because I believe it just wasn't suiting your riding style, and
Yeah. And
so
the R7 is I had again, the same buddy that has the BMW also has an R7. And we were at Roebling, and I was riding the big bike, and riding that big bike it's demanding, especially at Roebling.
yeah,
And I was getting sort of tired, and I was like, "Can I just ride your R7?" I was like, "I just want to go out and like I'll go out intermediate. Can I ride the R7?" I started riding the R7, and I'm like, "Dude, I'm having a lot of fun." Like, I'm having a lot of fun. I'd never ridden a bike that small at the track. The
yeah.
smallest bike was the R6.
Okay, yeah,
So I rode that. I'm like, this is a ton of fun. Like, I'm not, especially with the big bikes, you get a lot of like speed anxiety. And especially like I'm out there riding all day on the BMW, 170 out on the front straight. And then I get on that R7, and you're like lucky to crack like 120, 110. So it's like,
yeah.
you just have a
Yeah.
lot of time to think
I was
like
gonna say
about,
that you have a lot of
yeah.
more time to think, and you tap in the handlebar while you're
I
going down
usually
the
like to
straight.
cheer for it. I'm like, go R7, go.
Yeah, my RC390 is slower than that, but I barely get to like 105, 109, I think, and it's the same thing. It's just a lot, you got a lot of time to think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's especially jarring. Like, I raced the BMW in like 3 classes, and then the R7 in only one.
Hmm.
And so it's like I'm racing the BMW all day. It's like beating me up. I'm super tired, and then it's like, you get on the R7, it's like you're dancing like a ballerina, like the song.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
out there, I'm just like having fun. Like we're cruising, man.
Okay. Um, you do a lot of riding, and racing. The competitive edge. I assume that was always in you since you were 7 years old and it was going downhill. Um,
I'm very competitive to a fault, some would say. I have the
yeah.
insight to recognize that I'm probably too competitive sometimes.
Oh
I don't
man.
tend to get really angry when things don't go my way. I internalize a lot of it, right? That it's there's something I could do to have done differently. And 99% of the times that's the case, right? It's not the bike's fault. It's not the tire's fault. It's my fault. you know.
Yeah,
But
and what's your mindset? There's so many different questions I want to ask, but what's your mindset going into a weekend? I mean, you've been racing since 2021. For me, when up until I think 2020, like, so I've been going to Lowden from 2013 to till now, but I didn't go to any other tracks until 2019. Homestead was my
mhm.
first track. And for me, like a lot of new people, if the weather report says it might rain, my bike goes back in the trailer. Right? If it's like 60 degrees at Loudon, I'm just sitting here with my hands on my tire warmers. I'm like, I'm not racing today.
Mm.
And it took a while, not a while. It took till one time with Sergio, who I've had on the show a couple of times. We were at CMP together, and he's in full leathers. And I think his shift linkage broke on his bike, or the exhaust came off, or both. And he's just trying to get back out due to a red flag. And afterwards we were talking, and he was like, this is part of it, never giving up, being fighting through adversity and going out there. And I finally did that, and it's an amazing feeling to know that on one side you could be like, oh, forget it, I'm done, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? But going through it and then doing something, even just finishing a race, but even getting on the podium or whatever, it puts your mind in a different place. It puts you in a different level where you're like, all right, I'm not giving up. And you if there's time on the clock, you still think you can win. So, like, what was that like? Was it outside of the accidents? Like, was there different adversities just being at the track that you had to get over and fight through?
That's a big part of it for me, honestly. Like, I imagine it's something similar. I can't run for at all, but I imagine it's sort of similar to how like a marathon runner feels. Like, I there's actually a clip that went viral like in 2018 that I took in when we were in Kansas. We were out there during an actual tornado. Like you can
Oh wow.
see, I'm on my ZX10 and my buddy on his RSV4 is in front of me. I mean, it's pouring, it's raining sideways, and we're coming into turn one, what is like 1A. They have like a little kink thing,
Yeah.
and he just checks up. I mean, we're barely moving. It's raining sideways. He's going like 70 where he should be going like 150, but he checks up even more and he's going like 20. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I know it's raining, but what are you doing? And I look up and there's this huge funnel. As a person who lived in Kansas, I have to clarify it was a funnel cloud, not a tornado, because it
Okay.
didn't hit the ground, but there's this huge funnel cloud in front of us. And that's the only time I've ever been red flagged off of track, not through pit out.
Oh
They
wow.
literally sprinted out onto the track, like in turn. We made it through 1A. They came out in like 3, ran out onto the track with red flags and like brought us in. But like if it rained, I almost like prefer to run in the rain and race in the rain. Like I like the challenge of it, like the
Yeah.
adversity of it. And part of it, like I'm more of like I'm not the fastest person out there. So I kind of treat it more of like an endurance than I do like a series of small sprints strung together.
Right. Right.
Um, so it's sort of like a challenge of like endurance and like toughness for me almost like it's like my own battle inside of myself
Right.
versus just racing against other people. Like how many races can I do, how well can I perform in each one, what kind of adversity or conditions like can I work through while I'm doing the racing, and like that almost makes it better for me. Like even if I don't podium or anything else, like knowing that I sort of met that challenge, especially
Right.
I do it, I have a great team and teammates and people who help me out, but in general, I do it on my own. I don't, my husband doesn't really go with me. He supports me doing it. But in his words, it's boring. And I can respect that. I think I would struggle to go do, effectively, you're signing up for 48 hours of activities, right? Because, we're going to drive down there. We got the trailer. You're going to stay in the trailer. You're kind of pinned in there for 48 hours. So I can completely understand that sentiment. But yeah, that sort of like adds to it for me. Like that whole, I'm out there, I'm doing it, sort of doing it on my own, like going my own way. And I'm doing all these races, especially like, I mean, it's like the greatest feeling in the world when a guy comes up to you and he's like, I saw you in like every race this weekend. I don't know how you did it, but literally every race I saw one of the two bikes. Like they always recognize me because the bikes they're done identically. It's like, I did not see a race you were not in. I'm like, there were plenty I weren't in, but I like to hear the sentiment.
Nice. Well, that's a good segue because I was going to say, the elephant in the room. What is it like, being a female at the track and doing that many races? And it sounds from our conversation so far, it sounds like, it's been a wonderful experience, but, I'll let you, tell me if I'm right or wrong.
In general, it's a great experience. Everyone is unbelievably friendly. Especially, more times than not, people are more stoked that I'm a girl and I'm there. It's very exciting. When I went to Australia, like those guys, like were just beside themselves with excitement. There's an American here and she's a woman. Like
Wow.
they were like so excited. And the same sort of thing, like, in general, anywhere I go, I think sometimes people are like a little intimidated. I think I maybe give off that aura too. They're like a little intimidated and they don't really want to come up and talk to me. But in general, like once they're like, oh, like she's chill, they're like really excited that a woman's there and like she's taking it really seriously and like treating, that this is a thing that she's going to invest a bunch of time into and really take seriously. So it's been like a fantastic experience from that perspective. I mean, occasionally you'll run into people. I mean, I think it's been referred to as the ponytail effect. I did have a guy come up to me and say, I'm sorry about that really sketchy pass in 1A, but you passed me coming onto the front straight and I saw the ponytail and I saw red. And he came and apologized. He's you had the pass. I should just let you stay in front of me. But I had to do it. It's okay, dude. It's okay, I
guess. That's interesting. And that ponytail effect or being past effect, right? It kind of, when because that's happened to me in the past, and I crashed the next lap trying to chase some people down that passed me, and there was no ponytail, but it was just kind of like there's something that maybe it's seeing red. And I crashed because I wasn't thinking. Like I probably wasn't even hanging off the bike like I was supposed to going into turn 3 because I just got on the gas and low sided. And the only thing I was thinking was trying to pass back instead of trying to ride.
Same exact thing happens to me. Like that's effectively what caused me to crash at Roebling, right? I was really target fixated on the guy in front of me. All of my mental energy was just trying to pass this guy, and when something went wrong, I had I was task saturated, right? I had no more to give, so I couldn't address the issue, right? So it happens, right? It happens. I think some people are a little more triggered by the ponytail than others. But like I said, like that's only happened to me one time. And like 99 out of 100, like people are super stoked to have, more women in the sport. So when I rode up in Kansas and the Chicago area and everything, I would occasionally see women. But it was pretty unusual. And then obviously it's just track days. So it was way more laid back environment. And then when I moved here, the track days here, at least the ones that I go to, are really dominated. There's a lot of women, like a lot of women.
Okay.
It's a sort of crazy. I don't really know why. I don't know what the difference. I don't know if it's like nationwide that's happening, but there's I think the last track day I did it with Southern Track Days. I think there was 14 women out of 65 people. So that's a lot of girls. The racing it ebbs and flows. This year there was really only two of us that like went to most of the regular races. But you know, CCS, I mean, Neimer, you guys have quite a few women that race.
Yeah.
So I think it's becoming more common. Um, I do think a lot of women struggle. I don't have kids personally. I could imagine if I did, that would be a struggle, right? Like I'd have to choose, is this something I still want to do, knowing that I have like somebody who relies on me and like, when I broke my back, like my husband just took care of me. I didn't have to take care of like a baby, right? I have a
Right. Right.
dog, I don't have to take care of a baby. I imagine that might make it more challenging, especially for women who are like sort of my age to want to go out. If you're older and your kids are grown or you're younger and you don't have kids yet, that's probably sort of like ideal. But I can definitely see, especially at my age now, like that it would be a struggle to want it and to dedicate all that time. I mean, I know even a lot of guys who are dads really struggle to dedicate that amount of time to doing it because it's a lot of weekends. It's a lot of, if you're going to take it really seriously, it's a lot of time on the bike. It's a lot of money. It's just a big investment in seat time and everything else. And that can be hard when you've got kids.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was fortunate because normally I would do Lowden rounds, and then a pandemic happened, and I had a lot of vacation time. So that 2021, I was able to do those 2021 rounds. But
Mm-hmm.
after that, it was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, we're not going to do that every year.
Yeah.
Because I the responsibilities do slow you down from getting to the track, and like you said, if you know at the end of 2021, I felt the most comfortable on the bike. I was pretty much riding almost every other week at the track and stuff like that. And now I relocated to Florida last August, so I didn't really get a lot of riding time
Yeah,
last
I didn't
year.
realize. I knew you were doing the Neimer stuff. I didn't realize you were down here with me now.
Oh yeah. I'm down this way now, so I'm hoping to do Jennings, and I did Jennings last year track day, so I'm hoping to do a lot of that coming up this year and stuff like that, and get to more the tracks down here. um but like, so for me, I like even this round, so this year I did the Pan American Series. I think that's where I saw you most this year,
Mm-hmm.
going to NOLA and Talladega
That
and
NOLA round was rough, man.
yeah.
I've never been more afraid for my life than when I had to sit on my BMW and hold the freaking canopy down because the storm
Yes.
was going to just drag me and the motorcycle away. At one point, I was like, guys, I'm just scared. I'm going to
Yeah.
go sit in
No,
the trailer.
it was pretty wild. It was pretty
That was
wild.
wild.
But so and I think next year I'm hoping to do 10 rounds, if everything goes well.
Oh,
But
well,
that's the
hopefully we get 10 rounds, I don't
well,
wow.
yeah. So for me, I'm gonna be cherry picking. I'm picking all the
Oh, okay,
tracks.
okay,
I
okay. I
think
don't
between
blame
where
you. I don't blame
yeah, I
you.
think between Wera, Neymar, Azra, I'm gonna just pick tracks I want to race at, and because I don't have the time to. I don't know if I will. Well, my daughter plays tennis, and is one of the reasons I'm down here and stuff like that. So she's gonna be doing a lot of tournaments and whatnot. So I'm gonna be living around her schedule. So so it is what it is. I'm not complaining. I still get to at least get 10 rounds, but it's nice when you can get on a bike a lot. And
Mhm.
if you're fortunate, and it seems like this year, let's talk about that a little bit too. It seems like this year you did a lot of riding, and you got all those plaques in the back. So let's talk about like how many rounds you this year and how many races were you doing in a weekend?
So when the season started, I knew I was gonna miss Barber. I
Hmm.
knew I had a work trip, I think, or something planned. So I knew I was gonna miss Barber. And then the BMW wasn't even rebuilt for round one. I was on the R6 and I was not doing great mentally from the
Hmm.
wreck still. I think that was maybe like the second or third time I'd ridden since the wreck. And my hand had been my hand was all good, but I had not done a lot of riding. So I did that, and that was just sort of rough. It was rough, right? I tried to ride up in the thousands, and then I rode the 600s a little. It rained. I think it rained really bad that weekend, which in general is like good for me because I'll race no matter what, and some people will not race in the rain.
Right,
So
right.
so I'm a-okay racing in the rain, but I think I had like some mechanical. I think I broke a speed sensor. It was not a great weekend at all. And then we rebuilt the shop down here, Monkey Works Performance, rebuilt the BMW, and we had to wait forever for parts. The bike is like totally alpha racing-ized, and I had to wait forever for parts. You know, to your point, a lot of people are riding BMWs. It was kind of hard to get BMW parts, especially at the beginning of the season, because so many people in Moto A were running these alpha parts. Like I couldn't get the wheels, I couldn't get the body work. It was just a real pain. So the bike was built for NOLA. And at that point, I sort of sunk into the groove of what I was going to do, which was both the Superbike races. So in Pan Am, they have the endurance race, which is the Grande Corsa, and then you have your sprint in each class. So I was going to do the Grande and the sprint in Superbike 1000, Super Stock 1000, and then Euro Max, because the BMW qualifies for Euro Max. So that was already going to be a lot of racing, right? I think most people would maybe do 2 or 3, maybe like 2 sprints in a Grande, but to do 3 Grandes and 3 sprints in one day was going to be signing up for some suffering. And when I went at NOLA, I mean, I flew there. Actually, my buddy drove the bike out, and I flew there, and that was the first time I'd ever done that, which was a whole experience within itself, because that's weird to be going to the track with like your suitcase at the airport, right? Which is really weird feeling. Yeah, he had all my stuff, and I had never ridden it since we did it. That was like the first, and I mean, we completely redid that bike, right? It was really messed up. It had new suspension, new clip-ons, new rear. When I raced it the first time when I wrecked it, it had a turkey pan on it. Like it was totally stock. We had to strap a turkey pan to the bottom of it. So I was riding this really heavily modified bike, and we had a couple of issues, like mechanically. I think the rear speed sensor again rubbed on the exhaust, and so the ABS broke, and the bike did not like that.
Right.
And then we had that huge storm. That was a whole different thing. Did Tally, which was really hard on a bike that big. I'd never been to Tally, and it was like comical. It was comical to ride that bike. And at Tally, I mean, we do the extra laps.
Yep.
So I think the Euro Max, we had a gentleman's agreement. We were not going to actually finish all the laps. And that was like the only reason I made it through that weekend, because the schedule was always, I do Super Stock 1000 Grande, get a little break, and then the Super Bike and Euro Max Grandes were back to back.
Yep.
And back to back Grandes is rough, like really rough. So very happy. And then in general, I didn't really have any competition in Euro Max. There was not really anyone riding in Euro Max. So that was sort of like I would have to fight for podiums in Superbike 1000, and then I kind of got to chill in Euro Max.
Right. Okay.
And then Road A got canceled. I think we maybe had a Roebling round in there.
I think it was like 2 rounds that got canceled.
Yep. So Barbara got canceled, which was the one I was going to miss. And then Road A got canceled. And so at that point, we did Roebling again. And I was really close. I was like a couple of points off first for overall. And like at no point during the whole season was that ever a goal. Like I did not even begin to think about that. I was like thinking like maybe I'll win Euro Max. Like I don't really have any competition. Maybe I'll win Euro Max. And my buddy was like, no, like look at the overall points. And sure enough, like we pull them up, and it's like me and one other dude. And it was just sort of a weird season where a bunch of the races got canceled, and the timing of the other ones sort of didn't work for a lot of people. It was near like a lot of holidays, and it was like, who wants to go to Roebling for the 8th? I love Roebling. So I'm happy to go to Roebling for the 8th time, but not everybody is happy to go to Roebling for the 8th time.
Right.
So when we went into the last round, like I said, I rode the R6 that one time that first weekend. And then the rest of it was just a BMW. And I ran the same 6 races every single weekend. I did it rain or shine, no matter what. I just rode the same 6 races. And the kicker is the Superbike 1000 is always the last race, right? So that's you're signed up for basically like the first race of the day and the last race of the day.
Yeah.
So
how do you stay motivated? I've tried those, and I think the most races I've done in a day was with CCS and Azra. when they had the sprint round. So if you were signed up for 4 races, you'll be doing 8 kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think so. I guess 7 was the most because I was doing the GTU, and that thank goodness there was no sprint for that. You know, that's hard. The hardest part of the day is trying to stay mentally, like, you know, together for the last day, and especially where everybody's not everyone, but you see people packing up and rolling out and stuff like that.
It's that last race, that Superbike 1000. You know, in general, the Grandes, it's sort of like that whole thing, like I was saying, like the endurance of it, like almost like a runner's high. Like the accomplishment of doing it is like almost a reward.
Yeah.
But man, that last Superbike 1000 race is really rough. Like you're exhausted, and when you're under all that stress and like you're doing the Grandes back to back, it's like you're in survival mode and like you're just trying to finish. You kind of, that last race, I usually get 2 or 3 races off. Like you decompress, you realize how exhausted you are, that you haven't drank enough water and you have a headache. And then, well, strap back up and go do the Superbike 1000 race, which is usually one of my hardest races of the weekend because it's the most packed because it has the guaranteed payout. And so a lot of the 600 guys will ride up. So it's one of the most packed grids. Although I say that now, I had not ridden twins before this weekend, and those grids are crazy. So
I was going to ask, so when are you racing the R7 or just track day in it?
I raced it at Homestead. So that was the first time I'd had it. I bought it built, which was a new experience for me. I had not done that before. The guy had been running Wera. So I bought it built. We did a couple I did the body work. Shout out to Reese for getting that done so quickly. But we did the body work, and I think I moved the foot pegs or something. Like I barely changed it. And so I raced it, and that was a blast. That was so much fun. Like it was a little scary because the grid was so packed. And that last weekend, we actually had like a bunch of issues getting started. The first start, like somebody like bumped into somebody else in turn 1. Then second start, somebody stalled, and the guy slammed into the back of them. So it was the grid was packed, and it was rough and tumble. Like it was not like a chill experience. So that was really interesting to race bike, because on the Beamer in general, like if you're brave enough with the throttle, you can get around somebody, right? I can do a lot of really crazy things on the gas with the BMW, and you know, especially depending on how you position yourself in the corner and everything else. The R7, you don't really get that opportunity. It's not like a crazy amount of power. So it's just a different way of riding. Like you have to be like, it's way more momentum based, and like you have to be really strategic about your passing, especially because like some of the tracks, like the 400s, are like kind of competitive, just depending on how the track is, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's just a totally different experience. But that was a blast. So that last round, they were trying to make up for the rounds we missed. So what they did was it was a double header. So that means we raced Saturday and Sunday, which we usually only race Sunday. And so it's the same race day, just doubled up. So it was already double racing. And then the races were worth double points.
So you did like 12 races?
So I did 16 races in 2 days, 8 a day, 4 Grandes a day and 4 sprints a day.
Wow. That's
and 3 of the Grandes were back to back.
So in a situation like that, I mean, do you just stay on the grid? You just pit out and pit back in, or do you go fuel up and come back?
I actually made a spreadsheet and a plan, and it totally depends on what is happening. So like at one point, I'm doing it with my friend. You know, we're on a team together, and he has one of his employees comes, one of our friends comes, and he helps. So we were actually like planning out. He also races an R7 and an S1000. So when we were doing a lot of the same races together, so we would have to plan like, okay, you're going to put his bike here, and then, you know, his daughter is going to hold this other bike over there, and I'm going to come in, like do a stoppie into the pit. She's going to rip the transponder off of one bike and put it on the other. And then, you know, Jordan's going to help him with his bike. Like we had to plan it all out. He had to do a tire change at one point, and like we had to ask for relief to do a tire change in between the Grandes, which gave me a little break. I could get some water.
Right.
But yeah, you have to plan it all out. At Roebling, we have to do it at the pit. or
Okay.
at the hot pit. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
actually, someone has to push the bike up and do that. At Homestead, we can get away with just kind of pulling in front of the garages,
yeah, yeah.
because you'd kind of have to go that way anyway.
Right.
But yeah, it's very methodically planned, especially the tires, because if you're gonna, it was like, I think I posted, I did 144 race laps at race pace
Yeah.
in 2 days. So you're talking about 72 laps a day, and 3/4 of those are on the big bike. So you're
Wow.
asking a rear tire to do 50, 60 laps at full race pace at Homestead, which is it's like a drag. It's like 4 drag strips tied together. So it's
Yep.
just all gas, all gas, all brake, all the time. So yeah, that was a
All the
lot to ask of a tire.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Wow. And you say you're doing deadlift stuff now. So what is your workout like? And after this year, do you feel like you need to change your workout? Either for more endurance or more strength, and you know.
I think the working out has like enabled me to do this stuff I do on the bikes. I would never be able to do what I did this season if I wasn't working out.
Right.
Shout out to my trainer. I would not be doing this if I hadn't done that, right? Especially as a woman. Guys see me doing this and they're like, that's wild and borderline dangerous. But like, that you did all those races.
Yeah.
So I think next year we're talking about maybe doing endurance, like actual endurance.
Okay.
So maybe
With
like
with a team.
with a team, the actual endurance. I've
Nice.
never raced Wera, so I know they have the endurance league. I haven't really delved fully into that yet, but I like to like maybe dip my toes in it, kind of see what
Got
it's
you.
about.
If you need a
Um,
rider, let me know. I'm trying to do the same thing. Actually, I'm like, I looked at Azra's schedule and where we're scheduled. I'm like, all right. One of my buddies that comes on the show and stuff. He's in Atlanta, so I'm just like, all right, we could probably do Road Atlanta. I'm like, I got the KTM's and the R6, whatever. You know.
Yeah, I really want to try it, especially I probably do it on the R7. And, my riding style is just, I could turn 100 laps at the same lap time, like bracket racing style. Like that's
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
what I
yeah.
go for. I'm very, very consistent. So I feel like endurance would be great for me, right? Because it would be like where I shine. Like I could turn a boatload of laps just at the same exact lap time, just over and over and over again. So especially on the
Right.
R7, it's just less, I can't imagine endurance racing on the BMW. I mean, I kind of do it, right? I
Yep.
did 3 run days in a row, but I can't really imagine like actually doing endurance racing on the BMW. It's just, that's a lot. After 3, I'm physically and mentally drained. So
Right. And now, when you say do the endurance races, doing it by yourself or doing it with a team?
we've been talking about doing it as a
O-
team. I don't,
Okay.
very early stages of that discussion. There
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
they do one here at Jennings. I think they did it last year, the Separano Classic, and
Okay.
it's little bikes only.
Yep.
So the Twins is the biggest class. So we're talking about maybe doing that this year. With a small team. I think that would be pretty fun. So get a chance to try out the tires in that sort of environment too. Not a ton of people are running Continentals and endurance, and they're kind of made, honestly, just based on my experience, they do really well in that situation, right?
Okay.
I mean, I've in situations where I think some other tires would drop off, they kind of like power through. They have very consistent grip, so we're kind of excited to even just try that out and see how they
Okay.
do in that condition.
Nice. Well, like I could talk about motorcycle stuff all day, but at some point we got to end the show. Let's talk about your sponsors, and I know you're part of the family business.
Hmm.
Let's talk about that and how people can find them, and what you guys are doing and stuff like that.
So I'll start with Mayhew Tools. It is the family business. We've been in business since 1856.
Wow.
It's been in my family since the 40s, I
Wow.
think.
Okay.
So I'm 4th generation. And we make tools. I mean, I won't like go crazy into it, but we primarily make hand tools. So punches, chisels, pry bars, screwdrivers, bits, stuff like that. The easiest way to like buy Mayhew stuff is always going to be on Amazon. It's just the easiest way to go about it. But it's great to, we're one of the last US manufacturers of hand tools. A lot of the other ones have gone out of business or went overseas. We're one of the only US producers of screwdrivers, besides Snap-on.
Wow.
And so it's, if that's something that's like important to you and you want to support that, it's kind of our thing. So, so and then besides that, my main other sponsors are, Monkey Works Performance. He does all the work on my bike, and does a fantastic job. It's as I've gotten older and raced more and more, I've put, part of endurance racing is that the bike can't break, right?
Yes.
A lot of people experience, especially on a BMW, right? It's, we're just sort of flogging these bikes every single weekend, so they need a lot of care. So he keeps them in tip top shape. And at this point, I've only ever had that one mechanical, and it was honestly my fault because I put the exhaust bracket back on. So I'll
Okay.
accept responsibility for that. Never had a mechanical, knock on wood, so far. So
Nice.
yeah, and then I've got Continental, Woodcraft, Bison, just the rest of my sponsors. But yeah, predominantly Mayhew does the heavy lifting out there. So that's what you always see, the big Mayhew across the side. Everyone always asks me, like, why did you write Mayhem on the side of your bike? Like, what is that all about? And I'm like, no,
Yeah, like
that's not what it says.
you might have to put a phonetic, spell in there as well.
Everyone always says that. I'm like, they're like, you just wild out there, and I'm like, no, that's not what it
Cousin
means.
Mayhem. Oh
Not what it
man.
means.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask, what are your thoughts of the WCR, the women's series in World Superbike, and do you think that more younger riders now, besides fighting on the regular world stage, now there's a place for a lot of women around the world to now come and shine. And did you follow the series this year?
I did not follow this year. I love to watch like Moto A, and especially Ella and Kayla are both sort of local.
Hmm.
So I've met them a couple of times at Jennings. So it's super great to get to see women out there, like riding, right? They're not there, they're taking it, just as seriously as any guy, and they're out there, they're riding, and they're riding on their own merits. Like, it's not, when I told my mom, like, that I was going to win the overall, bless her heart, she just kept saying, for women. I was like, no. No. And she was like, but don't you get like a handicap? And I was like, no. She just couldn't even like wrap her head around. I finally got it across to her, finally, and then
Yeah.
she was very impressed. But like, she
Yeah.
couldn't wrap her head around it. So it's like, it's amazing, especially these younger girls. They're getting into it at a really young age, and then they're able to like excel. And it's super awesome to just see girls out there doing, like, that they're not doing it like riding like for a girl. They're just
Right.
riding.
Yeah.
Like, like, and that's, especially the way Kayla talks about, like, she just wants to get on a bigger bike. She wants to be more competitive. And like, she got that ride with Ducati, and like, no one even batted an eye at that. They were like, oh yeah, like, she's wicked fast. Like, that's her ride, like, so that's
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. No one batted an eye when she got the ride for Ducati, and I think for I don't know her. I've seen her at the track. I've seen her at Jersey. I've seen her at other tracks and stuff like that. Just like even some of these young kids that come into the club series and race when they're not in Motor America. If you're around, you already know she's fast, so you wouldn't be questioned. If she belongs out there, anything like that. But also uh, it- you know, motorcycle racing, car racing, it doesn't matter who you are, right? As long as
Yeah.
you got the skill that and you can go fast, and you know how to end the corners and exit corners and all that. It really doesn't matter where some other sports. It may matter based on
Mhm.
muscle mass and stuff like that. Racing a car or a motorcycle is just your skill set.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, from a really young age, in ski racing, especially when you're like under 17, sometimes the girls are faster than the boys. And it is a lot of it, because comes down to like speed anxiety, right? And then the girls are just developing like faster than the boys. So like I remember I was like 13, right? And I was already like 5'6", and like a lot of the boys were still like kind of small, right? And
Right.
they hadn't like gotten super strong yet. So for me, it was like that was sort of natural, like that we were almost on like an even playing field. Obviously, as you get older, like strength plays more of a role in it. But even then, a lot of it comes down to like technique and skill, and like you can kind of overcome a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that. And I think especially for women, my ski racing and forward into the motorcycle racing, women perform those things differently, right?
Yes,
Our
that's
bodies
what I've
are
heard.
different.
Yeah.
We have different, like our center of gravity is completely different. Our flexibility is different. Like how our minds work is totally different. In general, like, at least for me, I'm a lot more risk averse, right? I perform very consistently, but I'm more risk averse. So like getting, especially like over time, it has to build, right? Because right now, I would sort of be hard pressed to go out and find a female coach, right? It would be really challenging for me to go out and find a female coach. And when I was a kid ski racing, I had a male coach up until I was about 15. And then I got a female coach. And that was a big game changer for me to have a female coach, because, she's telling me things like that. A lot of what the male coach would tell me, like, you need to take more risks. Like you need to ski riskier, right? If you're
Right.
not in
Right.
control, you're not progressing. And my female coach was like, no, like you don't have to do it that way. Like there are other ways we can go about this that don't involve just throwing your body down the mountain at top speed.
Right.
So,
Right.
and a lot of that, I mean, even like nowadays, you hear a lot of that rhetoric, like go faster, ride faster, right? Just ride faster. Don't
Right.
more gas, less brake. And so I think over time, like as more and more women are getting into the sport, we just learn differently too. We don't learn the same way. In general, like I think most of the women I've ridden with are really, really receptive to training, and there's not as big of a culture. A lot of times, like there's this idea that you learn how to ride at the track and you stop learning, right?
Right.
I
Right.
think racing really enforces the idea that you can always get better. And that's something that I really take to heart, like that I can always get better and I always become a better rider. I think as more and more women start riding and start coaching and teaching, and the younger women are starting to come up and riding as well. I think that will like just continue to grow the sport, and having more women, specific events, because a lot
Right.
of women are just not comfortable riding against men, at least to start off. It's intimidating, very intimidating to a lot of people to go
It was
out on a
intimidating for me. So,
yeah to just go out there. And they have I think STT has like women specific events,
okay.
where it's just more. And then they have like the female Chuckwalla event they do. I think those are great because not everybody wants to just jump out there and start racing with 40 other guys, right? It can be hard to make that jump, especially if you're not super comfortable with it. So I think anything that gets more women involved in it, because people come from all different places, right? Maybe they're not ready to start, racing or just going to track days. And if an event like that gets a woman involved in it who might not otherwise, maybe
Right.
she'll find that she really, really likes it. I think in general, it's sort of the opportunity that they're, if you don't even have the opportunity, or you don't even think you have the opportunity, it keeps a lot of women out of riding. Versus no matter, sometimes you just sort of meet them where they are. Like, even if it's something like, just an all female track day,
Right.
if it gets more women in the sport, and, maybe from there, that's a jumping platform. She gets into something, she starts racing, she does more regular track days. Like, just got to meet folks where they are sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's for me, I didn't even know that was a thing to go like club racing and stuff like that. I was I was fortunate because one of my buddies told me about it. But I would have probably had a bike for a while and not pay attention. So it's almost you know it's not, I don't want to say commercialized, but it's not in the mainstream to easily be like, oh, this is going on, that kind of thing is happening. So it's
this
like,
is what's happening this weekend in your area. Like,
it's like it's clubbing that's happening in the area, but not racing. And that's the hardest part, because I think the information about motorcycle culture, motorcycle, club riding, club racing, all that, I don't think it's out to the general public the way it should be. Because I think there's a lot, and like even one of the guys that's on the show that I sold my one of my R6 to, he didn't know about it either. He just his friend. I knew his friend, and they came to my house, and they were just looking at the race bike. And I'm like, yeah, you can go racing and all this stuff. And the next summer they came up to Lowden, that kind of thing. And he was street riding for like 9-10 years before that. So that I think that's the hardest part about the motorcycle community, the awareness of the accessibility to go to the track and stuff like that, and where you can do things. It's not. It's not it's not available, readily available.
I think a lot of folks, at least my experience, like as an outsider before I started doing any racing, a lot of like small local racing is like kind of like rough and tumble, kind of like, I'm thinking about like dirt oval track racing, right?
Yeah.
Like if that was your only experience, like going with your dad one night in like 1995 to a dirt oval track, and the dude got out and like started slugging the other guy like in the middle of the oval track, like, and you're like, motorcycle racing, like, I don't want to get punched. Like,
right.
That's sort of your experience with it. Like, it might seem like really foreign, but then it's like, it couldn't be like further from that, right? It's almost just like an extension of like street riding. It's like, it's like people who are like, wow, street riding is like kind of dangerous, and I kind of want to like, enjoy my motorcycle like in a controlled environment. Like, that's the group you're riding with, not necessarily the guys who like want to like kick you like as they're trying to pass you or something.
I completely agree. Well, I'm going to stop it there. I want to thank you for coming on the show, because I can keep talking. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you at a racetrack pretty soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And find me at one of those Pan Am. I'm going to try to do all the rounds this year. I'm not going to try to race as hard as I did this year, but I'm definitely going to try to make all the rounds. So.
Okay, awesome. That's what's up, man. You got to add more trophies
I know.
to your wall.
I got to fill the whole wall all the way to the ceiling. So.
Nice.